The Sheriff, the Garden, and the Constitution. It's July 29th, 2026. Welcome to yes2hellwith.com. Perspective changes everything. Imagine it is the year 2041. You wake up and everything seems normal. Your phone recognizes your face, your driver's license, passport, bank account, medical records, and travel history are all connected. And it's done through a single digital identity. It feels convenient until one morning your vehicle won't start. A message appears that says monthly fuel allocation exceeded. Later that day, you stop at the grocery store. You place a package of steaks on the checkout counter. The register rejects the purchase. Monthly meat quota exceeded. You decide to leave town for the weekend. Your travel request is denied. Not because you've committed a crime, not because you don't have the money, simply because the system says no. Now ask yourself, is this a society you want your children and grandchildren to inherit? Most people would answer, absolutely not. Then ask yourself another question. When did it begin? Did it begin with artificial intelligence, digital identification, carbon tracking, facial recognition? Or did it begin years earlier, when people accepted one small restriction after another because someone simply said, the rule applies to everyone? If you only examine today's ordinance, you'll never recognize tomorrow's society. Now let me tell you a story. Imagine a widow who has lived on her property for 30 years. Every spring she plants a large vegetable garden. It feeds her family and she shares the extra food with elderly neighbors. She harms no one. Yet one afternoon, a zoning official measures the garden and hands her a citation. He tells her that she needs a permit or she must reduce the size of the garden. The widow asks a simple question. Why do I need permission to grow food on my own property? The official replies, because the ordinance applies to everyone. So let's stop right there. That single sentence reveals the real issue. No one asked whether anyone had been injured. No one asked whether the garden endangered the public. No one asked whether government possessed constitutional authority to interfere with a peaceful activity. Authority was simply presumed because an ordinance existed. That is how liberty is lost. Not all at once, but one assumption at a time. Unable to get an answer, the widow visits the sheriff. She doesn't ask him to abolish zoning. She simply says, Sheriff, I'm being punished for growing food on my own property, and I haven't harmed anyone. Now, the sheriff faces a choice. He can think like an administrator, or he can think like a constitutional officer. If he thinks administratively, the matter is finished. The ordinance exists. My job is to enforce it. But suppose he understands the office he holds. He visits the property, he investigates, and then he asks 4 simple questions. Who has been injured? No one. Whose property has been damaged? Nobody's. Who has been defrauded? No one. Who has lost liberty, freedoms, rights? The widow. Then he asks the only question that matters. Is there no injured party, no damaged property? Then he asks the only question that matters. If there is no injured party, no damaged property, no fraud, and no threat to public safety, by what constitutional authority may government punish this peaceful woman? At that moment, the conversation changes. It is no longer about gardening. It is about constitutional authority. The sheriff contacts the zoning department. The official repeats, the ordinance applies to everyone. The sheriff replies, that is precisely the question. Does it? Before my office participates in depriving the citizen of her liberty, I want to know what constitutional authority justifies your action. County attorneys become involved, state officials become involved. The newspapers criticize the sheriff. Some accuse him of refusing to enforce the law, but they misunderstand his position. He is not refusing to enforce the law. He is refusing to presume that every government command automatically possesses constitutional authority. Those are not the same thing. His oath was never to every ordinance. His oath was to the Constitution. If every regulation overrides a constitutional limit simply because it exists, then constitutional government has already failed. Think about how we normally respond when government issues an order. The citizen is expected to comply, to hire an attorney, to spend years proving why government should leave him alone. That turns constitutional government upside down. Government should bear the burden. Government should explain why it possesses authority before interfering with the peaceful exercise of freedoms and rights. That is the conversation almost nobody is having. People ask what law applies. Fewer ask, why does it apply? One question assumes authority, the other requires authority to be demonstrated. That difference changes everything. Now replace the garden. A father fishing with his son. A rancher building a stock pond. A homeowner collecting rainwater. A family building a cabin. The activity changes, the principle does not. If government may presume authority over every peaceful act unless the citizen proves otherwise, then freedom and rights slowly become permission. One permit, one license, one approval, until one day you cannot buy gasoline, you cannot buy meat, you cannot travel. And people ask, how did we get here? The answer is simple. We arrived one unquestioned assumption at a time. Freedom is rarely lost in a single dramatic event. It disappears when presumption replaces constitutional limits and reasoning. And it begins to return when citizens, sheriffs, governors, judges, and public officials ask one question before enforcing another restriction. And that is, by what constitutional authority does it apply? Because perspective changes everything. If you only examine today's ordinance, you'll never recognize tomorrow's society. And who are you to blame except yourself? And as always, may truth reign supreme.